Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Welcome to our Texans postgame show, Texans and Cowboys. Robert Land, along with my co-host, Sports Radio 610, Shaun Bijani. And if you're new to the party, we have 45 years in journalism between the two of us, 35 covering Houston sports. Shaun's out at NRG Stadium every day of the week, practically covering the Texans. So you're in really good hands. And Shaun, the Texans looked like a real football team today. This is what a real football game looks like in Houston.
Yeah, but they did things not even NFL teams that I can remember have really ever done in a game, and that's rotate quarterbacks. I mean, the last time I saw any team do this, aside from high school, it was Sam Houston State University a couple of years ago, and they had two really good quarterbacks. I hadn't seen that before, and I certainly wasn't anticipating as such today. I asked Lovie Smith leading into this game earlier this week that if there was an opportunity for Jeff Driscoll to be activated. That happened yesterday. But specifically, I asked him if Mills struggles at any point in time this game or down the last 4 or 5 games of the stretch of the season, can we see Driscoll? And he gave me some blanket statement. And I bet he's probably laughing his butt off now because I think that was the only one that even asked about Driscoll at all this week. And so whatever they did today, game plan wise, I'd be interested to know when they decided to put that in, if it was Wednesday when they typically get a game plan in, or if it was later in the week. But it certainly put the Cowboys back on their heels, and it worked long enough and good enough to keep them in a game and give them another opportunity to legitimately win for the first time in weeks and weeks and weeks. So it was really kind of a fun, interesting, wild, wacky game, a microcosm of what the NFL has been all season long, really.
And the thing is, it's not just that they brought in a quarterback and they were flipping quarter. It was just the fact that you went out there and you tried to do something different. It looked a lot like the same old Texans in ways, but at least this was something different. And I just want to remind everybody, if you're out there, we want to hear from you. Let us know what you think. Subscribe on our YouTube channel. If you're not watching us on YouTube already, you can comment as well. If you go over to YouTube and you find our link, we're live right now, obviously. And so we want to hear from you what you thought about this game. We're going to get the comments in just a bit. But Shaun, let's just start off with this game and the first possession of the game. Texans with no resistance on the Cowboys' first drive. They walk it down the field. This looks like it's going to be the same old deal. 9 plays, 76 yards. Pollard 11-yard touchdown run. Didn't even get touched till he was at the 2. Then typical Texans offense, 2 vanilla runs up the middle that go nowhere. Screen pass, 3rd and 9. Pathetic. Nothing changes. But then they luck out with a fumbled punt. I think it was Blake Cashman recovered. And Shaun, the just activated Jeff Driscoll, you just mentioned it. He comes in at QB. And as a Texan fan, you're like, oh, what's this? This is new.
Yeah. At that point in time, I immediately thought of the Rams and what they did with Walford the other night. They'd started him and they let him hand the ball off 3 straight times before going to Baker Mayfield. And so that was in my mind. I was like, well, maybe we're going to see Driscoll the entire game. And I had no idea that, a Pep Hamilton, coordinated offense was going to be able to handle the flip-flop back and forth between Mills and Driscoll, but that's exactly what they did. And I thought, again, they went to Mills at some unique times as the game grew a little bit older and older, and I know we'll get to that. But on that particular drive, I mean, Dameon Pierce was kind of freed up. The offensive line was freed up to kind of do what they do when really times were good, and Dameon Pierce was running the ball with a lot of success about a month or so ago. And that was kind of the element that I was most impressed with, most proud of, is that, Jeff Driscoll, I think the first time that he had the opportunity is he kept the ball and got a 4, 5, 6 yard gain. And what that immediately does to a defense is it makes you respect the fact that he's going to run, that they think they can run with him, and it frees up Dameon Pierce, and it really opens up the offense. And you really saw that come to fruition in this game. So I was really impressed with that.
Yeah, our old co-host Stephen Kerr on the comments, and we caught that one. He was excited like we were that it was actually a competitive game, and it's pretty much, after that fumble, it's the Dameon Pierce show. 4 carries, he gets the 1 yard touchdown. It inspires the defense. They look solid on a quick 3 and out. When the Texans get the ball back, they go back to Mills. So we start to see the pattern here. And on this drive, there was a long reception to Chris Moore. We're going to get to Chris Moore in a little bit down the road, but the Cowboys challenged because the Texans were way too slow to snap the ball. Looked like the refs could have called it incomplete. But Shaun, I would give anything for this franchise to have a quarterback, coaching staff, and brains smart enough to know when and how to quickly get off a play when you need to, when you know that challenge is coming.
Yeah. And I'm kind of right there with you. I mean, it is really obvious, and this is not the first time that something like this has actually happened this season. The Texans have kind of had a blunder like this a couple of times. That particular play to Moore today, though, that catch, I really didn't think it was a catch, to be honest with you. And it's based on what we'd seen under the catch rule previously in a lot of games over the years. I just didn't think, the ball hit the ground. The old adage, did the ground help you catch the ball, maintain control? The ball moved enough out of his hands to actually make contact with the ground. I didn't think it was a catch, just judging by, again, what we've kind of come to understand as much as possible what a catch is. But I'm glad it stood up, because that turned out to be one of the bigger plays in the game. It set up the Texans for a field goal, gave them the ability to take their first lead of the game. And Chris Moore, man, I know we'll talk about him, but what a game today. I mean, after that first reception I think it was his first reception, where he bobbled it in the backfield on that little screen pass. I was like, okay, this is typical Texans. But then Mills and Moore connect on a bomb like that, and you just kind of raise your eyebrows, and you're like, man, the NFL is wild and wacky. Let's see what the Texans can do with this thing today.
Yeah, and if anybody missed the news, which I can imagine you're missing Texans news these days because they're not getting covered a whole lot. Brandon Cooks, Nico Collins, both out for this game. So it was a lot of Chris Moore. I'm going to get to his numbers a little bit later. They ran the ball up the middle 3 times on they ran the ball up the middle on first down, and they ran it again. And then on 3rd and long, they ran it again. So it was, while the play calling was a little bit more varied this game, there was moments like that one where the conservative play calling is back to where it once was. But, if you want the first pick in the draft, you got to do these type of things. You know what I mean?
They could have excused this one away completely today. I mean, they could have won this game and not messed around with it affecting their number 1 overall pick status. I really believe that, even as bad as the Colts have been, and how far they've kind of slid since Jeff Saturday's, first win as head coach of that franchise. 3 weeks ago now. I mean, they're bad, but they could have slipped up and won this game and played a complete football game, which really this was the most complete football game. Again, they got huge contributions defensively. Malik Collins, to this point already early in the game, he'd kind of imposed his will as part of that defensive line. I thought really after that first offensive series for the Cowboys, Robert, I thought the Cowboys could have run it for 300 yards easy today. And they just went on a passing spree and really took the wind out of their own sails and could have imposed their will very early, on the ground with that combination of Elliott and Pollard. Why they didn't do that, I don't know. Sometimes coaches overthink things. They see a soft coverage that the Texans were showing and have shown all season long defensively, and you think maybe you can take advantage of it. I was just really surprised by that, but I'm glad it did work out the way that it did at the end of this one, where you had a game that was competitive. You were on the edge of your seat, and you were just hoping some way, somehow they could pull it out.
There's been so many games this season where I'm just like, why aren't they running the ball against the Texans in the first half? They always figure it out by the second half. The Cowboys didn't exactly figure it out by the second half, but the Texans' run defense was better as the game went along, and we're going to get there. But after a Fairbairn field goal, the Cowboys go back to gashing the Texans' D, 7-play, 75-yard drive in less than 3 minutes. It's 14-10. And it kind of was wavering early in the game. Like, is the Texans defense going to show up? Or are they not going to show up? Next Texans drive. They keep flipping between Mills and Driscoll. Lovie goes for it on 4th and 2. Pierce is stopped a couple of feet short. But, Shaun, in this situation, and then at the end of the game, I don't care if they go for it. You've got nothing to lose. I know people are going to get mad. Oh, they shouldn't have gone for it late in the game. That wasn't necessarily the thing to do, and blah, blah, blah. Go for it on 4th down as much as you want. They've got nothing to play for. Let's have fun at least, you know?
Yeah, we'll get to the one at the late in the game, but refresh my memory where Pierce got stopped in the first half. Where was the ball? Where did they decide to go for it?
Yeah, they were around the 42, maybe they were between the 40 and the 50. And it was that play where Pierce reaches
Yeah.
out at the last second and he's like a couple of feet short.
Yeah.
If he was able to keep his balance and stay on his feet, I think he gets there.
Yeah.
And I never have an issue with them giving the ball to Pierce on a short yardage situation.
No. I mean, and that's something they hadn't done earlier in the season, through that first month where Pierce wasn't on the field in those particular situations alone, the highest leverage situations, whether it be early in games or even later in games. It took the Texans a month before they even played Pierce inside of the 6-minute mark in a fourth quarter or overtime. And so, as kind of the season has gone along, whatever Pearson needed to improve on, whether it be, changes at the line, just kind of getting his mind right, getting used to the offensive flow. If in fact there were very many changes to get used to, if it was blitz pickup, pass protection, whatever the case may be, he obviously did that. I didn't have a problem with them going for it at any point today, to be quite honest with you. And I know we'll get to it, but the one late in the game to me made the absolute most sense. And the run right there that you're talking about after the nice Driscoll run that set that up was, the fact that, hey, Dameon Pierce looked like he had a lot of extra juice. He had a lot of pin-up energy. He was running with some anger today. We saw that pretty early on. And I think, it was all set up by the element. I've been on this all season long, where you as an offense have to make the defense think for a millisecond. And if you force them to think and make a decision, it affects their feet, it affects their body position, it affects their eyes, it changes everything. A millisecond matters. A second matters in this game. You talk about a game of inches. It's a game of reaction. And that was just a really great play. I forget what Cowboy made that tackle, but they were able to get Pierce by the knee or the ankle, which really forced him to go to the ground and have to reach out for that. But I loved the second and third efforts today by Chris Moore, by Dameon Pierce, by Jeff Driscoll. I love the energy, the juice that the Texans played with, and it was all exemplified early on by runs like that, whether you got it or not.
Yeah, and VJ, his comment is, we've got a lot of good draft picks coming our way. We can't have these guys waste these picks and not develop them. VJ not happy with, he wants to get rid of Lovie and Pep Hamilton. We've talked all about Caserio. Go back to our last post game. We had and actually you can just go to the clip because I have it up on the YouTube page about our thoughts on Caserio at this point. And we're going to dive deeper into Caserio as we get into the offseason. We kind of take a look back at the year, but I don't know about Caserio. We're not real sure about that one, but I mean, Lovie and Pep Hamilton, there's no debate or argument with that at this point. At least though, we saw some changes from them, but it's taken way, way too long. So after the fourth down stop, there's a couple of 3 and outs. Then Tremont Smith with an interception on an MJ Stewart tipped pass. The first of 2 Tremont Smith interceptions. That sets up Jeff Driscoll to Amari Rodgers, 28-yard touchdown. I'm going to say that name again, Sean. Amari Rodgers, his first catch as a Texan, and it's a touchdown.
Yeah, it was a hell of a catch by the former Green Bay Packer on that one. I thought an excellent job by Jeff Driscoll to roll out, extend the play. He looked dead in the water a couple of times during that sequence and really just made an incredible throw to Amari Rodgers, who, after watching what we all did, presumably, whether it was live or you just saw the highlights, what Baker Mayfield was able to pull off with the Rams this week on Thursday Night Football, and being in a system and practicing with a team for not even 2 days. Why, for the life of us, could Eno Benjamin and Amari Rodgers, who have both been in the system for 3 weeks, and we'd seen, other corners and receivers come through the Texans this season and had been in-house for 2, 3, 4 weeks at a time, whether it's Tyron Johnson or Tyler Johnson, they never played a meaningful snap for this team offensively. And in 3 weeks in, you finally get a chance to see what Amari Rodgers could do. And who knew it would be from the arm of Jeff Driscoll? I mean, that was just a really great play overall. Great throw, great catch, great sequence.
And it's not like Amari Rodgers changes your season or any of these guys, but you want to be able to evaluate them. And the longer you wait not playing them, the less sense it makes on Amari Rodgers, 4 catches, 57 yards, and a touchdown in this game. So the Texans, they drive down for a field goal at the end of the half. Couple nice plays by Pitre. Incredible day for him. Good coverage by Pitre on third down, forced the field goal. I think it was like 12 tackles or something by Pitre in this game. But with 40 seconds left, the Texans shocked me by actually doing what normal teams do, Shaun, and they went for a quick drive for points. Even more shocking, Mills, 43 yards, 5 plays, sets up a Fairbairn 50-yard field goal. The Texans up 3 at the half with 20 points. And keep in mind, they scored more than 20 in a game just once this year. In a game, it was more points than they had scored in 9 of their 13 games in just the first half.
Yeah, last time I think they'd scored more than 17 points in the game was week 6 or week 7 this season. So, yeah, very good decision by the Texans there. Again, there has to be this feeling when you get to a point in the season where questions for weeks now had been about morale. How do you keep this team engaged? How do you keep, kind of pushing forward and trying to pull together? You can't just give up because of your record. I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of what the organization wants, you still have to do your job as a coach. You still have to try to get the players to do their jobs as players and play to the best of their ability. And so you have to have this element of we're going to do whatever it takes on the biggest stage. I thought it was interesting this last week, particularly on Friday. Lovie Smith, who has a sit down with us without any cameras, without any microphones, talked about, hey, there's high school football still going on, right? Aren't they getting ready to play for a state championship? State champions, he said. That's what we want to be this week. We want to be state champions, and I don't know if that was kind of like a thing that he maybe used, in talking and preparing his players this week. But there is a little something, regardless of the record, regardless of the state of your organization, that this team does take pride in when you get a chance to play an in-state rival for, the first time in 4 years, and you only get a chance to do it twice in a decade. Things like that. You have to try whatever you can. And I thought maybe that was kind of the impetus for the reason why we saw them come out today and play so well. And you know what? The fact that the Mills Driscoll combo worked early and you saw the benefits of that adds a little bit of juice to the players as well. They start thinking like, you know what, we could do something here. So you saw it. They got contributions special teams wise, defensively, offensively. They continued to move the ball, move the chains, and keep the Cowboys on their heels in this one. So I thought that was a huge, huge deal for the Texans to take that lead at that point in time ahead of halftime. I still thought they kind of botched that possession a little bit. I thought they could have really had another shot and really tried to go for a touchdown if the timing was handled a little bit differently.
Baby steps, Shaun. Baby steps. Come on, man. Hey, they actually tried to get points, which
Fair.
is for me. And Davis Mills looked like a professional NFL quarterback in that drive. And we'll get to the drive, the last Hail Mary drive of the game with Davis Mills, because some stuff that I just didn't get on that one. But let me just say this: Jalen Pitre, I mentioned him just briefly a few seconds ago. Yeah. Pitre with the big game, he's in the right spots. It still drives me up a wall, Shaun, that so many times he's tackling with his shoulders. He doesn't even use his arms. I understand when he's trying to hit somebody with his shoulder, it's a receiver, he's trying to jar the ball loose. But against running backs, you're not going to get you are not going to get the ball loose with your shoulders against running backs. You got a better chance to wrap and use your arms and swipe down than you do trying to knock a running back over with your shoulders, especially these elite guys like Ezekiel Elliott and Pollard. He just drives me nuts. And I'm like, who is correcting this? At some point, he's now in the NFL. This is high school, college. At some point, you would think somebody would teach you form tackling. It's amazing to me.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for years and years and years in the NFL. I mean, form tackling, what? Are you kidding me? I mean, it's the da-na-na, da-na-na. I get what you're saying. I didn't even think to even make mention of that in my notes until the final defensive possession of this ball game when the Cowboys were driving, and I made a note, and since it's relevant here, I'll go ahead and share with you what I said. And I said, man, I'd like to see Pitre use his damn arms on those hits. He's taking tools away from himself and getting the ball out. It's one thing to be there at the right time, but it's a completely other thing when you're using everything in your power, if it's your arms, if it's your hands, if it's your helmet, whatever, in an effort to get that ball out. And it was that play, the throw on the right sideline where he hit it perfectly. I think it was Schultz or if it was Lamb, but who knows? It didn't have to go down as a catch. He could have knocked that out. The timing was perfect.
Is this something that you can ask him about in the locker room? Is it worth that?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I would love to hear what he has to say about it. First drive of the second half, Pierce fumbles, but the Texans defense has Pierce's back. They stuffed the Cowboys and Ezekiel Elliott on 4th and goal at the 1. Desmond King, Jonathan Owens, and Christian Harris didn't even let him get back to the line of scrimmage right there.
Yeah, it was an incredible goal line stand and another Pitre moment. I mean, he was playing like a mofo today. The physicality that he was bringing. I mean, I thought, at that point in time, I kind of, they showed the replay of that goal line stand, and I said, boy, they feel him. They know he's there. He, maybe for the first time all season, has really imposed his will and made an offense feel his presence because of the big hit, because of the fear of the turnover, because he's kind of mature. This is the second straight game, Robert, since he'd struggled for really about a week with the missed tackles, getting picked on in the red zone, giving up the most yardage at his position, yards after catch all season long up until last week. He's really kind of stepped his game up and is playing better in space and identifying what is in front of him. He's feeling the players around him more. I thought that was another really good possession by not just that defensive line, but Pitre in general.
Yeah, Desmond King and Jonathan Owens and Christian Harris, they were the three guys that were there. Owens, a couple of big plays for him. The one at the end of the game, although it didn't matter because the Cowboys scored, he jarred the ball loose towards the end of the game and at least gave the Texans another chance to end the drive. Unfortunately, we know it didn't happen. Between Driscoll and Mills, we go to the next drive. They go 63 yards, 10 plays to set up a 54-yard Fairbairn field goal. The Texans still looking professional, still looking like they're wearing a suit and they're ready for the game today. And the biggest play of the drive, the two biggest plays, the 24-yard run by Pierce and a 14-yard Mills to Rodgers pass on 3rd and 6. And I'm just curious, Shaun, what's the thought on Rodgers? Like when you saw them pick him up, is that somebody that has potential to be here next year as somebody that's competitive and can actually do some things? Because, honestly, you had to be excited just in the short time that we saw him today, what he could do.
100%. I thought with Eno and Amari particularly, both guys that have had some successes elsewhere, you're trying to get the best guys possible in-house already and getting used to the building, getting used to the locker room, getting used to the players, regardless of who's going to be here or not in just a few short months. It's all about evaluating and who can help you going forward. And look, they're veterans too. I mean, you need as many good guys, good, competitive, hungry guys with a chip on their shoulder that want to contribute in whatever way as many of those guys as possible. So yeah, I was excited about it, and I was also frustrated over the course of the last 3 weeks, thinking like, WTF? Like, why aren't these guys on the field? The most I've seen of Amari is him catching, BS meaningless punt returns in practice. The one day that we get a chance to really see that from a special teams unit. Outside of that, yeah, he's running the drills with the offensive, or whether with the wide receivers, on offensive drills and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, I think today this is huge. This is the most important tape that he's probably been able to put together all season long because he wasn't getting a lot of reps in Green Bay. Eno, on the other hand, didn't put out the best showing today, but it came at a really weird kind of time. He started getting most of his touches after Pierce went down, was already banged up with the ankle. He was going to come back out with it taped up. That didn't really work out too well. It really hindered what the Texans were able to do at a point in time. But I think at least today, it's a good springboard game for both of these guys over the course of the last month to see what you really have in it, because it is about putting days together, weeks together, games together.
Yeah, and I didn't really feel like they had much blocking for him when he played. So the next drive, the Cowboys go for a field goal. They get down there, they get a field goal 23-10. The Texans and the Cowboys both with quick 3-and-outs. And the Texans drive to the Cowboys 40, but on 3rd and 5, Driscoll's screen pass batted down before it gets to the receiver. And even before it got there, I could tell the entire Cowboys defense would have been ready. I mean, you could see this one coming from Mars and Jupiter with a pair of regular old binoculars, Shaun. This is classic Texans. Just like, let's tell everybody in the world a screen pass is coming on a 3rd and 5 or 3rd and 6.
That was the action, right? The play action, and then the Driscoll screen pass to the right. Is that?
Yeah, that's the one.
So Mark Sanchez, who was doing analyst work on the game today, pointed that out immediately. And I thought I was crazy for a millisecond, thinking that, wait, that seems like a really ridiculous designed play, because if you wanted to throw that screen pass, fine. What made that screen pass unsuccessful was not the blocking, on the exterior. It was the blocking on the interior. And your defensive end and your linebacker for the Cowboys were able to really bite down on that, not think at all, just react and go off of what the quarterback was doing. If in fact, and I think it was Eno in the game at that point in time, if you would have had him to that play side and fake the action to the left, what Mark Sanchez made a point of and mentioning in his breakdown of that was that then Driscoll kind of becomes like a shortstop, taking a double play ball from the first base side, stepping on the bag, pivoting his hips, and just throwing to first. Well, that's all Driscoll had to do. You fake that motion right to left, so he's crossing face, and then you make that throw. That throw is available in that point in time because that end and that linebacker can't cheat down and get into the backfield. They have to squeeze and go down the defensive line, the line of scrimmage. So I thought that was just a horrible play design, and really just one of the few hiccups today by Pep Hamilton in the offensive game plan. But it was certainly, to me, a costly one at that point in time.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's not just a hiccup, it's the one that we've seen like 1,000 times. But anyway, so Chris Moore ends up downing the next punt following that at the 1-yard line. Again, Moore, fantastic. 10 catches, 124 yards, picking it up with no Brandon Cooks or Nico Collins dress. So then Tremont Smith comes up with his second interception of the game. Again, though, he gets a huge assist on the interception. The first time it was MJ Stewart. This time, Okoronkwo hits Prescott's arm, causes the interception. And Shaun, he also, right before that, had forced a Prescott fumble that it felt like it was an hour and a half. The ball was sitting there and the Texans could have jumped on the ball. They couldn't quite recover, but you got to, Okoronkwo has come up with some plays towards the end of games at times for the Texans. It goes unnoticed though, with the defensive pressure being so bad for the Texans for the most part.
Okoronkwo's a guy of very, very few words, but he was made available to us a couple of times this season and actually this past week. And ever since they'd put him into the starting lineup, I think it was Aaron Wilson that actually asked him the question and availability earlier this week, and that, hey, has that kind of given you a little bit more juice? Are you a little bit more excited? Are you playing a little bit differently now that you're in that starting lineup? And Okoronkwo actually was like, well, yeah, I'm excited about it. And, I appreciate the effort that the coaches, saw in me and stuff like that. And they're giving me opportunity. Well, he's made the very best that opportunity. He's looking like the last 2 weeks, Robert, the version of Okoronkwo that we saw in the preseason. The guy was everywhere, flying around. I could pull up every single game that he played in this preseason. The guy was just an absolute monster. In the mix on every play, in the backfield on every play. He is a disruptor. And I don't know why it took the Texans so long to utilize that from him. because I think it's more about them and their personnel usage and schematically what they're allowing him to do versus just these players in these instances. And we could get into a whole nother conversation of exactly why that's been the case, but I think we all know why. It was just really good to see him be such a factor today. And really, the Texans, with a lot of these players, particularly Okoronkwo, Pitre, and even Pierce, who started to kind of, have a little success last week, carry that over to this week, put things together, fight through the adversity, and really show out.
So speaking of Dameon Pierce, he gets injured, which is an issue because now you've got the ball inside the 10-yard line. You don't have a lot of good options, and it's 4th and goal from the 3. And I don't know if you want to go back to anything before that, but I just want to get your thoughts, Shaun, on the decision to go for it up 3 on 4th and goal. I've already stated my position. I'm like, let's just throw everything on the table because I don't care. You can't do anything this year. And then the play call. What did you think about that too?
Okay, going for it. Let's just talk about that. It made the most sense. Like, why would you kick a field goal, go up 6, and give the Cowboys extra time with better field position? Presumably, if it's a kick and it goes out of the back of the end zone, which Fairbairn and both of these kickers were doing on the regular today, the Cowboys start from their 25-yard line with a stopped clock. Okay.
I guess the argument I guess some would be, okay, if you kick the field goal and they go down and score a touchdown, even if you only have 40 seconds like you did at the end of the first half, you would have a chance to come back and kick a field goal.
You'd have a chance to come back and kick a field goal. You obviously put it in the Cowboys have to do 2 things. They got to score a touchdown and they have to kick the extra point, okay, to go ahead instead of just, tie after the touchdown.
Yes.
Fine. I get that, but you're 1-10-1, man. I mean, you're right there. You're inside the 5. You're so close. Just go for it.
You can end it.
The Texans would have scored a touchdown on a couple of plays prior to that if, in fact, Tegan Quatoriano would have held his block. When Pierce ran over the right side through the B gap, Tegan lost, his guy on the inside, and they made the play on Pierce on that particular play.
Pierce was out by then, right?
Maybe it was Eno, okay?
Yeah.
It could have been Rex. I can't remember.
Rex had a run at one point in that last sequence.
I don't. Rex nowhere, lost 2. Tegan beat on the block. It was Rex on the run. Looking at my notes, so they could have scored there if Tegan holds his block. It didn't happen. No problem going for it. To me, it made mathematical sense. You are who you are kind of sense. Just do it. In terms of the play call, that's coming off of a timeout. And Driscoll, before the timeout, when they approached the line of scrimmage, were ready to run a play. Ball was snapped, and it looked like Driscoll didn't know what the hell was going on already. So there was already some miscommunication happening. Out of the timeout, more miscommunication. Was it on Driscoll? Was it on Rex? I don't understand. I mean, that's about as egregious of a thing as you can do out of a timeout in that particular situation. You have to make sure of one thing. It can be the crappiest play call ever, as long as all 11 guys are on the same page. Somebody was wrong. I don't know who it was. If it was Rex, then Driscoll made a hell of an attempt, to try and turn a negative into a positive play. If it was Driscoll, he still made a hell of an attempt to try and turn a negative into a positive play. So I'll just give him that. I thought personnel-wise, no problem having Rex stay in the game in that particular situation because we'd seen him with success in the red zone and even score a touchdown in an instance about a month ago. Okay. And that was a game at home, and I can't remember. It could have been the Eagles game. I'm not sure. But just play design, whatever. I just think I'm not going to go there. I just think it was poor communication until we find out exactly what happened, what occurred on that play, and what the reason was for it looking so bad. I'm going to reserve kind of like judgment on that. But what I really like to see the Texans do, and they just kind of refuse to do it under this PEP system, is goal line situations like that. Don't allow the defense to load up and anticipate run and clog it up. Spread it out, make them think you've got the right guy in there quarterback-wise to do that. He'd done it all season long, or all game long, rather. And now you're just going to load up, and you're really limiting yourself in already a short field.
Yeah, and that's been an issue all year is because they love these tight packages and even if you don't have threats to move the guys defensively, they have to cover somebody that you put out on the edge. And it just makes no sense in today's NFL
Well,
to do what they're doing.
To be honest with you, I meant to get to this earlier, but I think it was on the Cowboys' second or third series where it was the series early when the Texans got that goal line stand in the first half. The Cowboys did the same thing. They had an opportunity to impose their will still with their run game, even though the Texans were having success at that point in time and stopping it. The Cowboys decided to go tight at the goal line, and they got stuffed with Ezekiel Elliott trying to run, inside zone. And if you're the Cowboys, I'm spreading that thing out. One, because I just like that look in general on the goal line, whether you're going to run or pass out of it or show play action. That's one. But then two, I'm trying to take advantage of one of the worst tackling teams in the NFL. And I'm going to try to go outside zone or at least appear that I am. Maybe there's a cutback lane there set up off of a double team block or whatever your scheme is offensive line wise. But they didn't do that. They just said, you know what, we're going to put our head down and we're going to run them right through your face. Well, they showed they could do that in the first series. But at that point in time, it's like, again, make a defense think. In this point, in my example, make the Texans defense think. And they didn't do that. So I just thought like some interesting coaching decisions on both sides of the ball today.
Yeah, and the Texans are terrible at tackling, especially in the middle. If you're gonna bring the safeties in, those are the best tackle. Those are the guys that are in the right spots. Not always great tackling, like I said with Pitre, but at least the safeties and the corners can tackle on the Texans a lot better than some of the other positions where you actually expect it. Last Cowboys game-winning drive. Any thoughts in particular on that drive? I mean, I mentioned that Jonathan Owens, he helped you out, gave you an extra down. I mean, otherwise it just felt like it was your typical, they were going to get the touchdown one way or the other.
I just thought early in that drive by the Cowboys, the Texans really gave up too much in the intermediate. Schultz was carving them up. A soft zone by the Texans. It really hasn't worked well for them. I mean, certainly beats the hell out of going press man. We saw the who played the Rams the other night? The Raiders. They got beaten press man late. Allowed Baker to find on 2 or 3 instances on his final drive, solo receivers that just beat their guy. So look, going zone in that particular situation is something that you should do. I would just like the Texans, and maybe they just don't have the athletes. I mean, and I really kind of tend to believe that is the case more times than not. Is the season they're 1-11-1 for a reason, and they do have just a bunch of guys for the most part, but. I'd just like to see them tighten that up a little bit. You could play zone, but initially, maybe just don't give up such a big cushion up the middle. Maybe have those backers drop back a little bit instead of, your typical 3-4 yards. Maybe have them almost bail to about 7, just clog or carry those intermediate routes into the secondary a little bit more. But that was one. And then 2, I thought when the Texans got that stop on the 2nd and 4 and set up a 3rd and 1, the broadcast missed the damn play. You didn't see it on TV because the Cowboys went hurry up to the line. I couldn't even tell you what they ran. I just know they got about 5, 6, 7 yards out of it on a 3rd and 1. That was the biggest deal to me. The Texans had a timeout in their pocket, I believe, 1 or 2 of them. Use it at that point and kind of give your defense a chance to kind of take a breath and get loaded up again because they were getting gashed. Boom, boom, boom. 3-4 straight plays to set that 3rd and 1 up. You needed time. And then Pitre, I don't know who the receiver was. Schultz was featured in this final drive. I think Lamb was featured in the final drive. And there was another receiver that had caught a pass, but whatever ball was thrown on the right sideline, Pitre timed it perfectly, but it was all shoulders. If Petre's able to get that right arm in there, maybe he's able to, get a pass breakup on that instance. I can't remember the down distance, whatever the case it was. I just hate to see a guy, waste an opportunity to create another one for your team, which the Texans did so well today. And Pitre was right there. It's almost like that little whip, for a baseball player in the box. I mean, you talk about just that little bend, instead of getting your swing really long, you're going to hit the ball far either way. But man, that little extra bend and timing that ball up in the box is the difference between, hitting a ball 400 or 450 feet. And if Pitre could just get those arms involved, get the hands involved, because we know he's not afraid to hit. And we know he's hitting his landmarks now the last few weeks. Create opportunities, extra ones, and see if he can knock some balls down. That's what I would say.
Last drive, I just want to mention it because, like I said, Davis Mills, I just don't understand him sometimes. It's like you've got to get a touchdown to now win the game. Okay? You have no timeouts. Davis Mills on the first play with hardly any, I didn't feel like there was any need for this, quickly goes to the outlet running back for 5 yards or something, who was covered and got knocked out of bounds immediately. I'm like, dude, I don't care if it's an incomplete or if it's intercepted or whatever. You've got to throw you don't have time. You don't have time. You don't have timeouts. You throw the ball down the field, give yourself a chance to win the game. And Davis Mills being scared in a game that you're probably losing anyway is just like, this is why I just don't like him. The guy, I think, plays like a scared puppy. Like when it's the first quarter or when it's the fourth quarter, he's always scared. That's why I was so amazed at what he did at the end of the first half, where he actually looked like he was confident and he's throwing the ball down the field, as opposed to a lot of the times where he's immediately looking for the 5 yard or the dump down or whatever. I mean, part of it is obviously some design screens with Pep, but part of it is Davis Mills is a scaredy cat.
Yeah, and that was actually something that we covered with Lovie Smith, and maybe it was even Pep Hamilton this past week during their availability. Is somebody asked the question in regards to Davis, after being benched like this and then being named the starter again, what that does to him in those kinds of moments, or just other higher leverage moments in a particular game. Is he thinking a little bit too much now? Like, do you worry about him doing that and making a mistake? And if that was already the case before, is it exacerbated for, and maybe trying to do too much and in fear of being benched again? And that was addressed, and it was like, well, we hope not. And I can't remember who it was. It was either Pepper, it was Lovie, and I think it was probably Lovie. And he was like, well, look, we hope not. Like, we hope over the course of the last 2 weeks, he's been able to kind of see some things that he's done well. It wasn't just about things that he wasn't doing well and correcting those. It's looking at the things that he was doing well and figuring out how we can put you in those situations more often. How can we continue to try and get the things out of you and what you do well in this scheme? And yeah, I mean, the smart ass in all of us are saying, well, you don't have that much to choose from. But, there are obviously things, and you saw some of those today where he is getting out in space. You saw bootleg from Davis Mills today. And, those are things that was really set up by what Driscoll was able to do in the read option and that element that the Texans brought today. But it was still something that Davis, a guy who ran a 4.56, 40 at the combine. I mean, he's not a freaking slow dude. He's not a statue. Like, the guy can get out and run. You saw him do that today. He even broke his own ankles in the instance of trying to, get a first down. But those are some things that he can do well. And I think that still has to be an issue. And it's innate, right? And all of us, like, you get benched for making mistakes, maybe making a throw that you'd like to have back. You're going to certainly think about that the next opportunity that you have to do that. It's just about a growth opportunity. And I think that's really why you saw Mills on that final drive for the Texans. It's like, hey, it's a good growth opportunity for him. But then, two, what does he really do well? If he is forced out of the pocket, we know he can throw the ball pretty well on the run. And you saw it there with the big Moore completion to get him into Cowboys territory there. And from that point on, obviously, is where he really kind of struggles.
Last point I'm going to make is a little complaint on Dameon Pierce, and hopefully he's going to be okay, and we'll see him some more this year. Hopefully that wasn't a big injury, but he was walking around. I thought it would seem like it was real precautionary with him, but
yeah,
I'm a little frustrated with Dameon, and this is where I think the difference of Dameon Pierce being a good Pro Bowl running back and an elite, like in the class of best in the NFL, greats of all time running back. Dameon Pierce, there are too many times where I see he decides he's going to go straight up the middle and into a bunch of traffic when there's like all of this space outside. And I saw it. I think it was, I want to say it was last week I saw him do it, where I'm yelling at the TV like, man, why are you running straight up the middle in between the tackles? I know he likes to get north and south, but there are times where you got to see the space and you got to go to the space because there's nobody there. And there was the play. I can't remember when exactly it was. I think it might've been in the second half before he got hurt, but basically they had spread everybody out. It was this weird play where everybody was spread out, and there's basically 3 defenders on the against the Texans offensive line. And the Texans, I don't think even had 5 guys in there. I think it was one of these weird plays where they just did that. And I'm like, Dameon, just go outside because there's nobody there because everybody was so far out around the hash marks. If he goes into that space, there's one guy behind that line. That's it. There was one guy on that second level. And basically when he goes into that trash in the middle, you got all the defensive line can come off their offensive line and grab him, which they did. And he got nothing out of it. If he goes outside, he's got the one guy to beat. You should be able to make a move on one guy. You're Dameon Pierce, or you should be able to run him over. But you see the guy coming and you make that, but boom, he's gone. Yeah. And then there's nobody. He had all sorts of space there. And I've seen him do this multiple times where he gets tunnel vision of like, I'm supposed to, they've told me to go in between the tackles, or that is the way he likes to run. And he's like, I run straight ahead and I run people over. And sometimes, man, you got to get outside your box a little bit and make a play, do the Barry Sanders thing and see what you can do with it. And he's got the moves too. It's not like you can't do that either.
No, I get what you're saying. There's really two things there. One, a guy who is so good through contact is probably going to gravitate towards more of that. He's looking to impose his will and say, my best is going to be better than your best. You're not ready for this kind of thing. And he thinks he can run through, more contact than he does.
Well, but if you continue to run through contact, you also shorten your career too.
Yeah. And look, that's something that I think, he'll learn. And that can be fixed. Okay. But there's also another element where, you're looking and you're seeing one thing on TV in a coverage pre-snap, and then there's the play. And I'll just say this, from a, guy that used to coach offensive line for 10 years and coordinate an offense, run my damn play. If you go rogue and you think you see something and you want to try to do something different, well, guess what? Those 5 guys in the offensive line, they think they're doing one thing. They don't know that you're thinking you're about to do another thing. And if you get caught, if a play is made on you and you deviated away from what we repped all week in practice in that particular situation, I'm gonna whoop your ass.
But that play is so specific. You have spread out the defense. Yeah, you have one guy on the second level. You have hardly anybody in the middle. If you just go to the right of your right tackle, I'm not asking you to go 10 yards out, because if you go 10 yards out, you're going into the guys that are all spread out on the right side. To me, it's that simple. There are times where there's nobody out there. You go to where there's nobody's at. If there's nobody there, that's in football, and you're a running back, that is the best thing to do. And it doesn't mean you're not running behind that particular guy. It just means I start to go behind my right tackle and my right guard, and I just make a cut and I go outside of them because I know, look, there's nobody there. It's blank space. How do you not go towards blank space in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, I get it, and I can't really comment any further than what I had, because I need to see the play that you're actually talking about. But I'm not going to pretend either that there's not freelance on particular plays. There's a little bit of freelance in everything. It's a reactionary sport. But
as a coach, you're not complaining if Dameon Pierce is standing in the end zone, though, are you?
Well, I'll celebrate first and then chew some ass later. But because you don't want to create bad habits, you don't want to create an element of distrust, and you don't want to put other guys in a particular situation. You know, when they're anticipating, taking an inside zone step, whether it be left or right or an outside zone. And the defenders are then showing them something completely different. Sometimes you can put a player in a position that could incur an injury. You know what I mean? So that's kind of the only thing that I would really stress is like, hey, I understand what you're seeing, but let's trust our blocking. Let's trust the play design, because it was actually a look that we really liked, that we really wanted. And sometimes, look, it's not. When you're outmanned and it's a 4-on-2 and you're trying to run outside zone, well, that's not going to be a very successful play. Other times you might want to, put your right foot in the ground or put your left foot in the ground and hit that cutback. On most runs, there is a cutback lane. Sometimes there's two, depending on, the front that you're seeing. And so that is also up to the running back to make that decision. If a linebacker is crashing down, you stick that right or left foot in the ground and you hit your cutback lane. And that cutback lane will lead to one inside or outside once you approach the secondary. So, I mean, these are all things that you rep in practice. I'll go back to that 75-yard touchdown run that Dameon Pierce had is kind of like, hey, welcome to the NFL moment for Dameon. It was within the first couple of 3 games of the season, that 75-yard touchdown run. I can't remember who it was against, but he said, man, that was a play that, we'd worked on and sucked at in practice up to that point. And we called it and it worked out beautifully. And that's just kind of what they got. Well, I regret now, but I wanted to ask him, is like, okay, well, did that play work against the front that you actually practiced it against? Or did that play work because of some freelance type of decision making? Or maybe it was somebody on that offensive line that just made a terrific block they typically hadn't been able to reach in practice. Sometimes you can ask your offensive line players to do things that they're just simply physically not capable of doing. It's almost like asking Laramie Tunsil to pull, from his left tackle to the strong B gap. That big sucker ain't going to make it all the way over there and reach a linebacker. It might look good on paper, but it ain't going to happen. Okay. And so it's just little things like that. Sometimes you can draw it up and rep it in practice and it works against, half speed, but you get into a game when everybody's going 100 miles per hour and it looks like absolute, what. So I want to see the play that you're talking about, and I will actually talk to Dameon about that in terms of like vision, decision making, because one of the things that really led to his success so much earlier this season, Robert, is his patience and allowing the offensive line to set those blocks up and really find the space there. He's able to make guys miss, when it's a 1-on-1 or a 2-on-1, and he's putting his head down. It's another thing when he's got to, really create his own space and get through that first wave on the defensive line.
Hey, I got some good news. If people missed it, the Browns lost, so that helps the Texans, obviously, with the draft choice, 23-10 to the Bengals. Deshaun Watson, though, looked a little bit better, I guess, from the numbers. I don't know. What do you think of this? 26-42, 276 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, 79.1 rating. Not bad. Obviously a big upgrade from last week.
How many sacks?
3 sacks, it looks like.
Oh. Did he run the ball a lot?
Rushing yards, 6 carries, 33 yards, 5.5 per carry. He had a 9-yarder in there.
Yeah. I mean, I expect a guy like that to, steadily improve, not really stay static. I think he'd finished the game last week with a rating of like 53.5 or something like that, which was actually just 0.1 better than the rating that Kyle Allen finished with. I can't remember if that was final numbers, but I remember looking at that like towards the end of the game at the very least and thinking, wow, what are we looking at here? This has been kind of bad on both sides. I think it was last week, maybe it was a couple weeks ago, but yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson's really good, and I expect him to be really good as long as he's healthy for a long time.
They're 5-7 right now. They've got upcoming. The Ravens are next without Lamar. Obviously, then they've got the Saints, who, they're not that good. And then the Commanders, who've been playing really well, as we know. And then the Steelers, who actually are playing a little bit better. So those last two games, you would think are going to be a little tough because both of those are also road games as well.
Was that last week or 2 weeks ago where we had the return of Watson? Wasn't that last week?
Yeah, last week.
Okay. Yeah. So I remember ahead of that game thinking that, going into that game, I think the Browns had like a 9% chance of making the playoffs. And it's like if they won against the Texans, the percentage shoots up to like 15, 16%. And if they win, if they would have won, or if they can win like 4 of the remaining 6 games, like they've got like a 60, 70% chance. And that's just based on what they're doing. Never mind what anybody else in the wild card hunt is doing. So they just need to continue to win games. But I legitimately thought on paper, with Deshaun Watson, the Browns have a realistic opportunity to, at worst case, go 3-3 the final 6 games. And at best, 4-2. Is that going to be enough to get them in the postseason? I don't think so, just based off of their really, really slow start. As good as Jacoby Brissett was for them, they were just too up and down as a team. The defense wasn't playing like that all season long. The run game, with their offensive line, I don't know if they'd been banged up or not, but it certainly wasn't looking like it was against the Texans for the bulk of the season. So I think, it's about next year for the Browns. You get Deshaun back in training camp. You make that smooth transition. There's no more suspension, none of this hoopla surrounding them. They get their quarterback for the first time in full. So I think it's really about that. And I think he's going to be fine, just so long as they put the weapons around him to help him be successful. And you just think about what he was here. And the Texans could have done so much more on both sides of the ball with him here, despite J.J. Watt, saying they wasted one of his years. Well, it wasn't just that defense, and it wasn't just coaching. I mean, they were missing quite a few pieces all over the place when Watson was here. They weren't done building. It would have been nice to see what it would have looked like as a final product.
Well, let's put a ribbon on this one. Texans, of course, lose 27-23. They're 1-11-1, 1-6 on the road. They've got the Chiefs coming up next. Mahomes, that one's not going to be too fun, I would imagine, but we'll see if they play like they did today. Maybe they can make it interesting again. But anyway, we'll catch up with you as the week progresses. Keep an eye on the feed because we're going to keep coming at you with shows all this week. Me and Sean will be back on Wednesday. We got Andy talking fantasy football and everything that's going on in the NFL, and along with the Texans preview with him as well. So definitely got that coming up, and hope to get Frank talking Rockets at some point this week too. We'll see if we can get him as well. So until then, hope everybody has an incredible weekend and enjoy yourself as we head into the holidays, and we'll talk to you again really soon. Take care.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, you can support the show by subscribing on YouTube and commenting on the videos. Listen to Houston Sports Talk on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, and Google. Don't forget to tell a friend and share our show on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.